There's an issue that has quite a hold on our men. Men of every station in life are caught up in its grip. Today you'll meet a pastor that had an addiction to pornography. Stay tuned. My name is Yvonne Lewis, and you're watching Urban Report. Hello, and welcome to Urban Report. According to top10reviews.com, 28.8 million U.S. men regularly visit pornography websites. 50 to 60% of Christian men struggle with addiction to porn. Today our guest is Pastor Bernie Anderson, author, counselor, pastor, and lecturer. Welcome to Urban Report, Pastor Bernie.
Hi there, Yvonne. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you taking the time out to do so.
Absolutely. It's good to be with you.
Well, you've written a book entitled Breaking the Silence, A Pastor Goes Public About His Battle with Porn. Would you share a bit with us about your journey with the whole addiction?
Sure. It's been quite a journey. That's a good way to put it. In fact, I remember coming up with the phrase that any journey worth taking involves a climb. And that's really what this has been about. It's been a climb out of a really deep, dark hole that unfortunately many men find themselves in. And I was no exception as a pastor. I was exposed to pornography at the age of 9. And from that point forward, it seemed that any time throughout my life, as I grew up as a young man, throughout my adolescent years and into my early adult years, I came across pornography. I wasn't necessarily looking for it, but there it was. And so from that experience of just kind of growing up in a culture where pornography was accessible, I learned to depend on it for sort of an escape, a way to deal with stress and anxiety, and just a way to kind of get through life's difficult challenges and so forth. So that pattern continued, unfortunately, into my adult years. And as the pornographic industry became more technologically advanced, as the internet emerged, I found that it was something that I could not stop doing. It was something secret. It was something quiet, something that I just sort of did when no one was looking and no one was around. And once the internet came online, I believe it was around 1996, 97, it was that much more powerful. The delivery system was even with dial-up internet, if you remember those days.
Yeah.
Pornography was still quite captivating online. And I remember just out of curiosity, I said, you know, I'm gonna check this out just to see what it's like. No one knew that I did this. I was a full-time pastor serving in the church, and this is something I just sort of stumbled across one day out of curiosity. And
Okay.
from that day forward, it was just an ongoing battle.
Wow. Well, let's go back for a second, because I think that it's important for our viewers to know how it starts. So you said that you were 9 years old when you were first exposed to pornography. Was that because it was in the home? Was it because you picked up a magazine? How did that happen?
Good question. It was really, it was just a matter of stumbling across it in the home of a relative. I was actually staying at a relative's home, and I was one of those kids that just sort of rambled through people's homes searching for treasures. And there I was in a closet. There was a box there. I opened the box, and someone had discarded a pornographic magazine. They just sort of crumpled it up and ripped it apart and threw it in this box. And there I was searching through this box, and I was able to unfold those pages and sort of put them back together, and there it was.
Wow. You know what, Pastor Bernie, it's interesting because sometimes when we let our children go to other people's homes, we don't really know what goes on there. And I think it's not a matter of, you can't protect your kids 24/7, of course, but it's very important to kind of know where your children are going and to really kind of keep a tight rein on them, especially nowadays when so many things can go on. So you were over at someone else's house and you found this. What effect did it have on you at that age?
Well, at that age, I think I wasn't sure what to think. I hadn't had a sex talk from my parents. I didn't understand, what it was. I understood maybe just as a young boy that man, this was quite interesting,
Right.
But I really didn't understand what was going on, and I had a sense that maybe it was bad,
Right.
And so I put it away and just sort of made a mental note. And while at the same time I knew it was bad, I kind of sensed that maybe I should come back and look at it again,
Yes.
But that's the 9-year-old little boy trying to figure out something very, very powerful. So,
and that seed was planted. That seed was planted at that point, and so it was a little bit less difficult to venture into it again at 15. So what happened at 15? How did you get re-exposed to it?
Yeah, and at 15, actually, I think it was more like 13, I remember being at my home, at my own home, and finding an unmarked VHS tape on top of the television right next to the VCR. Unmarked, and again, I was the child of a single parent, and so no one was at home with me. I was a latchkey kid. I get home, there's this VHS tape. I'm going to pop it in. I mean, that's just what you do at 13 to see what's on this tape.
Right.
Sure enough, there was pornography on this tape, and I don't know who it belonged to. I don't know how it wound up in my house, but there it was, and I watched that tape, and it was another level of exposure. It was another delivery system for something that I had experienced back at 9, but here it was in sort of in living color, in a much more potent medium. So it was powerful, and that from that point on, especially as an adolescent young boy, I think it began to sort of take root, so to speak.
Yes. Now, at the same time, were you watching programs on kind of sexually explicit types of programs on television? Were you listening to music that could draw you into that? Where were you spiritually when you were as a teenager? Where were you?
Yeah, this was really a new beginning spiritually for me. I had recently come into the Seventh-day Adventist Church, been baptized, and all of this is sort of happening at the same time. So spiritually, I'm really conflicted because I've been exposed to this pornography. I'm looking at this stuff. There's probably some movies and some music that I've seen and watched that weren't the best for me. But it wasn't all the time. It wasn't as intense as perhaps it is today, because access wasn't as easy back in those days. You had to have a VCR, you had to have cable, and we didn't always have those things. So it was hit or miss, but there was certainly a spiritual battle going on within me, because I knew that some of the things I was seeing, whether it was pornography or not, and then some of the music that I was listening to, all played a factor in sort of how I was developing as a young man and as a Christian.
Yes, isn't it interesting how Satan works? He plants a seed in your childhood, and then waters it some in your adolescence, and just begins to draw you into this web. He knows our buttons, and so he will push those buttons and draw you into that web of sin, and before you know it, you're caught up. So how did you get caught up into porn?
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if you add in the factor of personal, familial, family dynamics, if you come from a broken home, if you come from a home where there was abuse, if you come from a home where there was a constant arguing or neglect or abandonment, those things play into it as well. Because I think the human heart longs to look for something that gives it meaning, and we long to look for something that will help us feel better about life and about ourselves. And so as a young kid whose parents were recently divorced, I had a very distant relationship with my father. I think that those things also played into it. The beauty of it was that I came into a church that really embraced me as a young man and said, hey, we love you and we want to be in your life. And so God, at the same time the enemy was working, God was also working out this plan so that I would know him, so that I'd be in a church where people cared and loved me. So
yes, and I think that's a very important point to make, that even though we know that the enemy knows us and knows our buttons, we also serve an omnipotent God who can deliver us from this, and who also knows more about us than the enemy, of course.
Absolutely.
So he knows what we need, and he knows our situations. So that's an interesting point. And the other thing that you said, I think we need to emphasize too, and that is the familial dynamics here. Because one of the things that is so plaguing us as a society is fatherlessness, is that role model of a strong father to kind of guide you through this journey of life. And if you don't have that, then you kind of get caught up into, you get detoured. And so I think you hit a detour when you when you had this experience. And so again, tell us how you got caught up now. What else happened to you that just led you into full-fledged addiction?
Yeah, I think it was, again, just sort of a matter of doing life and coping with life without a lot of guidance in the area of sex and sexuality. And the church, while it was there, but it wasn't there it didn't do a good job of informing and instructing and giving guidance in this area. So as with any person, you just sort of go through it and make it up as you go along. It's an education that you just self-educate. And unfortunately, we tend to do that in a negative way if we don't have proper guidance. So, you know, the sort of the slow drift down into this dark place was a matter of you know, getting caught up in the internet. Once that came around, videos got better in terms of technology, DVDs and so forth. So access and you know, the ability to maintain anonymity became it made pornography that much more enticing. So whereas in the past I had to risk being seen going into some seedy, you know, pornographic shop, once the internet came along, once technology got better, I could look at pornography in the privacy of my own home when no one was around. And so that really, in fact, I would say that many men who struggled prior to the internet coming online, I'm sure that once the internet came along and they discovered it, there was a major spike in people moving more into a deeper addiction to pornography, as opposed to before, where you had to really work to get pornography, and you had the risk being seen. And one of the most powerful things about it is that it can be anonymous. No one has to know about it, and you can just consume it without interruption in the privacy of your own home.
Yes.
And that's the path that I took.
Yes, isn't it interesting? Again, secrecy and the whole clandestine aspect of it, that's also something that the devil uses with affairs. You know, it's just you and the other person, and the secrecy involved makes it more exciting. It's the enemy is really, he does what he does. Well, he's had thousands of years to kind of, excuse me, to kind of perfect it. So he does what he does well. But again, we serve an omnipotent Savior who can save us from the grips of the dark hole. And you mentioned that dark hole. So where were you when you were at your very bottom? What was rock bottom for you?
Yeah, well, you know, let me back up just a little bit. Unfortunately, rock bottom wasn't at the place when my wife discovered it. You know, this was a deep, dark secret of mine that I brought from 9 years old and through my teenage years into a marriage now with the woman I loved. And my greatest fear was always that she would find out, because I did not want her to find out. I wanted God just to fix me and take care of me before she ever discovered it, and she would never have to know, she would never have to experience the pain, because I knew that it would cause her great pain. So unfortunately, rock bottom wasn't when she did find out, because inevitably, I think spouses do discover it, and they do know, and they come to find out. And so there would be another year to 2 years after she had discovered it, and after I had said, yes, this is my problem, that she would continue to discover me and find that I'd been acting out, find that I'd been looking at pornography secretly when she wasn't around. So really rock bottom was when she was going to be gone for a couple of weeks. She always took the kids to camp meeting and another conference, every summer. And I was left at home by myself to continue to do ministry and work and so forth. And being alone for someone who struggles with this is a very, very difficult thing. And I found myself alone and found myself unable to resist the temptation and the urge. And I just went headlong into a binge over the next, week. And it was at the end of that binge, and at the end of a period where I had a sense, and I kind of knew that my wife wasn't going to return. In fact, she had said in her own heart that I can't go back to him. I'm not going to go back, and maybe that'll just shake him out of this insanity that he's in. And that was rock bottom. I remember throwing my hands up and just sort of pleading to God, why can't I get through this? Why is this such a struggle? Why can't you fix me? What's wrong? And that was it. I just felt lost. I felt like there's nothing God could do for me anymore. I felt like my wife was going to leave me or wasn't going to be around anymore, and that was going to be difficult. I had pretty much I decided that I was going to lose my ministry and not be a pastor anymore, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me, because I was devastated. I had no idea what was going to happen.
So at that point, you were just like in the depths of despair. I
Yes.
mean, there was no place else to go but up at that point.
Nope.
You were losing your wife. And you know what? I think we need to briefly look at how this affects the spouse as well. Like since you've been healed and delivered, praise God, from this, how did your wife express her pain?
Well, it's a very difficult position for the spouse, and typically it's the woman in most cases to deal with it, because there's a deep sense of a broken trust. They are deeply hurt and wounded because this person that they've invested so much in has lied to them, essentially. And so they're angry, and yet at the same time they want to show grace and be understanding at some level because they love their spouse. And in my case, as a pastor, my wife doesn't want to expose me to any sort of, she doesn't want people to know about it. So she wants to maintain the secret, yet at the same time, she's dealing with her own anger. Then she's wondering, well, what on earth is wrong with me? Why does he have to go look at that when he has me? What's wrong with me? So there's a multiple emotions that a woman feels when they've gone through this experience and been betrayed. And my wife was the same. And she was angry. She was hurt. She wondered what was wrong with her. If you were to talk to her today, she would tell you that her self-esteem was just in the tank. She just felt worthless, and she couldn't understand it. I mean, there's total bewilderment. I think for females, for women especially, they just cannot grasp why. Why does a man need to go there and dwell there?
Yes. So how did you get out? What happened to bring you out from this place?
It's in the same way that we talked about. There's this dark hole.
Yes.
There's light that must come in, and really it was a matter of exposing, bringing the light into a very dark place. And so God whispered to me what he had been trying to attempt to communicate to me all along, and that is, tell someone, confess.
Yes.
Let's bring some light into your life. And so I called up a friend, someone that you and I both know, and Pastor Mike Tucker of Faith.
Oh, yes.
A very dear friend, and I called him up and I said, can we talk? And he came over to my house, and in the midst, just right there in my living room, I finally had enough courage, after being rock bottom. And I said, I will do whatever, but this is my struggle. This is my problem. And I need help. And I'm just broken, and I have nowhere else to turn. And so I turned to him as a friend, and he prayed with me and said that, hey, I will be here for you, whatever you need. And that began the journey. And that was the light that needed to shine into that dark place.
Yes.
That began the God's opportunity to create a breakthrough in my life began at that moment.
Yes. So the first thing you did was you prayed, and you were in your deepest, darkest place of despair. You prayed,
Yes.
and then you shared it with someone that you trusted.
Yes.
Because, again, that secrecy, for your wife too, because you're a pastor, that secrecy keeps you bound up. You had to tell someone. So that's the second step. What's the next thing you did?
And then the next step was to begin to walk in that journey. I mean, to begin to pursue those things that are pure and right and holy and good. And that's a much tougher journey to take, because now you have to actively, begin to do things that you weren't doing before, that don't come as natural.
Like
so in
what?
other words,
Such as what?
Such as, well, my life before, as I was indulging in pornography, was all about the secret. And I had to be quiet. And there was really a paranoia with my life, because I was constantly looking over my shoulder wondering who knows my secret,
Yes, yes.
Well,
yes.
now I'm going to walk in light. I want everyone to see into my life. I want my internet activity to be seen. So whereas, I would go into a room and shut the door and be online, well, my computer's going to be out in a very public place now. My conversations are going to be very open and vulnerable, and I want more people to see not just the external, but see into my heart, if that makes sense. Because no longer do you want to live in darkness, but the whole orientation of your life has to become that you're authentic, that you're transparent, that people can see the real you, not just the you that you want other people to see. And so here's a phrase that I came up with through all of this, and that is, I would rather be admired than known.
Ooh.
And if you think about that, a lot of people live that way. And so in the midst of this deep darkness, that's what I began to live, is that I'm okay with people admiring me, because they don't really know me. And so there has to be a change in every man's heart to where they decide that I need to be one person that people see all the time, and it needs to be the same person.
Yes, yes. Not that separate person here that the public sees, and then the private guy is somebody totally different.
Exactly.
That's great. So how do you maintain sobriety? How do you keep it there?
Yeah, and that's the real key. And I think accountability is huge, and I think the whole orientation and philosophy of your life, if you will, has to be that I'm going to live in such a way that people can see my whole life, and that's what I do. So if I'm online, let me speak in a more practical sense, then if I'm online, then someone always knows that I'm online. My wife knows when I'm on the computer. I have accountability software on my computer that sends a log to specific people so that they know where I've been on my computer. So since my major area of challenge was the internet, then that's where I need to have the greatest light and exposure. And, it may be that others struggle with magazines or DVDs or other things. Then they need to make sure that there's light in that dark place where they tend to run to and hide. So for me, the internet has always been a great struggle and a challenge. So I have a great deal of accountability on the internet. Very often I limit myself, I discipline myself not to just surf the internet. I don't think there's really any need to just casually browse the web. I think you have to go on with a purpose. There's a reason why I'm going online, and that's what I stick to. and that doesn't change. So it's a matter of adding some significant intentional disciplines to the life that I really think are powered by the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit wants us to live a pure, holy, righteous life. But God is also aware of the fact that we live in a world that is driven by all kinds of lusts and desires, and there's pornography, and there's all sorts of things. So God comes alongside of us and empowers us to begin to do some of these things that make a huge difference in our lives.
Pastor Bernie, thank you so much. This is such great information, because so many people are caught up in the grip of this addiction. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and encourage our viewers to check out your book and to be accountable. Thank you, Pastor Bernie.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Yvonne.
There's no problem too big or too small for our great God. If lust and pornography are your struggles, take it to Jesus. Make a choice to put no wicked thing before your eyes, and find a trusted friend to whom you can be accountable. You can be delivered. You heard Pastor Bernie talk about the steps in his deliverance. First, he prayed, and he asked God to deliver him from the grips of this addiction. Then he called a trusted friend, and that friend came over and prayed with him again. So now the cloud of secrecy was removed. And then, after he prayed and he talked to that friend, then he made himself accountable on a regular basis. That's an important point, because somebody has to know what you're doing, so that kind of keeps you from getting tempted and sucked back into that pattern of behavior again. God has deliverance for you. God has a special destiny for you, and he wants you to be secure in him. Well, that's the end of our program for today. Tune in next time. It just wouldn't be the same without you.